Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. This is Gemini Brett here to speak about a most magical moment astronomically, astrologically speaking, which is this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. Sorry, I'm just realizing that I need to pause a thing in a place that would have us hearing feedback here, so hopefully that's not going down. But hearing feedback from the heavens or being in harmonic resonance with the heavens. Now, this is how this moment looked where I am in Richmond, California, with Taurus on the rise, and Uranus rising, Pluto at the midheaven. That's an interesting happening with outer planet energies. Of course, Neptune being another one of these outer planets that's right on center stage. I want to make this a little bit more worldly. I'm just happy to see this and to remember that I had the natural wisdom to be in a bath, which felt very Taurus and Pisces simultaneously. So let's turn this into a zero Aries or so-called natural zodiac wheel, which places Aries on the first and Pisces as the 12th. I see these so-called natural signs as the houses of our planet Earth. I'm personally less connected to this astrological alphabet paradigm that Aries is the first and Taurus is the second. However, I will say on a global perspective, I feel there's some solid astronomical support for that idea, and maybe enough said there. So when I'm speaking for a moment globally or for many different surface locations on Earth, like not only where I sit, but wherever you and you and you and you and you are, I really am less about houses. I can't be. Houses are a part of a local experience, but signs are global. In fact, we measure planets in the signs, not from the surface of the Earth where we live and breathe and witness these heavenly happenings, but from the center of the Earth where we are all one. And that's an intriguing truth, actually. If you tune into that, what is it saying? It's saying that our personal experiences of the heavenly harmonies are about how that celestial symphony's chord is experienced at the center of the Earth, right? How our planet experiences the engagement with the other planets of our solar system and stars and all the other things. But, these aspects between the other planets, like from Earth's point of view, right now, Jupiter and Neptune are aligned, right? How is that happening for the heart of our planet? And it's as if this moment now is resonating in Earth's heart, and we feel that resonance, whether we are in California or Nebraska or Ukraine or whatever it may be, okay? And I don't know, that might be a Tauresian concept too. Truthfully, only the moon is close enough to the Earth for this to make a difference on a chart, like whether we cast a chart geocentrically, which literally means the center of the Earth, and that's what this is in almost all the charts that you look at, versus topocentrically. I mean, I can cast charts heliocentrically, which sends me out to the sun's point of view. Actually, let me show you that for this moment. From the sun's point of view, now the sun is at the center of the chart, and this is Earth. Jupiter and Neptune actually are not yet conjoined. So when that happens from a heliocentric or sun-centered point of view, it'll be interesting to see how the sun reacts. Will that lead to a cosmic outburst or something like this from the sun, a CME? But typically, because we are here on Earth, we are looking at earthly charts, right? So that's geo. Let me cast that thing again. And usually we're looking at geocentric charts, like the center of the Earth. We can also cast charts for the surface of the Earth The closest I can do with that, I guess, here in Astro Gold software is to look at what's called the parallax moon. So this is the topocentric position of the moon. And you can see it didn't change that much, but it really depends where on Earth you're looking from. In fact, there's places on the surface of the Earth where in this moment, the moon would still be in Leo instead of in Virgo if you're looking at a topocentric calculation. You see the moon's right at the cusp. Why am I getting into all this like super earthly topocentric stuff? Well, maybe that Virgo moon or that Taurus Mercury, even though it's a Pisces connection or conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune. That's, the title of this stream or this flow. And while I really want to be in flow, I want to do that with my feet on the ground, right? This is my school. It's called the School of Earth Astrology. We're about witnessing the heavenly happenings from here on Earth, experiencing which lives beyond the veil from this side of it too. And I think there's something very important about this moon moving into the sign of Virgo. So we've had this weird astronomy lesson to begin. That's not too weird if you know my work. But whether you are in a location where the topocentric moon or parallax moon was in the sign of Leo during this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, 7:43 a.m. Pacific time, today, April 12th, 2022 on the Pope's calendar. And a fun thing about that hour on this Tuesday, which is said to be Mars's day here locally, is also Mars's hour of Mars's day. And we're going to look into how both Jupiter and Neptune are in incredibly Martian places when we get a little bit more particular with our view in the zodiac, as maybe the Virgo moon also is wont to do. So whether you live in a place like I do where the moon was in the tropical sign of Virgo in this moment's time, from the surface calculation as it was from Earth center calculation, for all of us everywhere on Earth, even if the topocentric moon was in Leo in this moment, the geocentric was Virgo, and the geocentric I have found is right. I mean, I really hesitate to use that word, especially when we're talking Pisces. What is right and wrong? I just want to put this away and rap about that for a second, though. Strange place to begin. But I didn't write notes or something. I want to just be in the Pisces flow. My dear friend Pepper Proud sings so beautifully this lyric she wrote, or was written through her, which says, "Rain doesn't doubt it will end up in the sea, doesn't seem to worry about its destiny." Check out the album Water by Pepper Proud. And if it's the first time you've heard that, you're welcome. Thank you, Pepper. What a genius poet and musician. So rain doesn't doubt it will end up in the sea. Regardless of where I begin here, we will find our way to what is meant to come through in this transmission. Sometimes I set out with a goal in mind or something I need to say. At other times, I just hit record or broadcast or whatever it may be, and see where the winds take us on these cosmic seas. This version today is of the latter way, which I think is extremely Piscean. I've always been challenged by how most astrologers begin any transmission through the 12 signs with Aries. Actually, this year, my Earth astrology school called the Golden Year, we began with Capricorn. Because you can begin a circle anywhere, first of all, and there's some genius reasons behind why Aries can be seen as first sign or the beginning of the circumference of the circle, although a circle truly has no beginning to its circumference. there's a lot of those mysteries revealed in words like Easter or Passover, by the way, but that's a tale for another time. So most astrologers begin with Aries, which is seen as the first sign in this time of Aries equinox, or the sun moving into the sign of tropical Aries at March equinox, as the beginning of the astrological or the astronomical year. And there are deep astronomical reasons for this, but I always experience this frustration when I'm listening to astrologers do transmissions for all 12 signs. Because Pisces, being last if you begin with Aries, and only if you begin with Aries, never gets enough time, right? You actually, it's interesting. Witness this as you're experiencing astrologers transmitting about the 12 signs in the future. Maybe we should do that for this one here today. You'll start with Aries. By the time they get to Capricorn, the 10th of Aries, it's like, oh my gosh, look at the time, which is hilariously Capricorn, right? And then Aquarius, kind of, you have to rush through that. And by Pisces, it's like, oh, sorry, Pisces. So maybe we shouldn't begin with Aries every time. The challenge is when I was like, all right, fine, I'm going to start with Pisces, like this sign, which is spoken about the least, because everybody starts with Aries and makes Pisces last, and they're out of time by the time they get to Pisces. I'll just start with Pisces. The issue is, when you start with Pisces, when you use that archetype as the energetic to launch a thing, it tends to be a rather dreamy, meandering, boundarylessness, and that means timeless path. So you might not even get to Aries by the time time is up. And so Pisces, so beautiful, so poetic, so dreamy, so flow, is the right space to begin adventures that align to that. But if you're in some kind of time constriction, you might want to actually think about starting with a sign that helps you just blast out of the gate, and Aries is want to. So a trip about that. And so I did not blast out of the gate today. I started talking about the parallax moon in geocentric versus topocentric measurement, which might have just lost some folks anyway. But again, Earth astrology is how I like to play. I'm very interested, for example, in planetary visibility. A very important part of this Pisces Jupiter-Neptune conjunction today, actually. So I'll just share a story before moving on from this topocentric versus geocentric thing, and you may have heard me share it before, because this is when I realized about this difference in calculation. I had experienced it, I think, as a result of the software I used to use, which is Intrepid astrology software, because if you move from an Earth-centered view in that software to a heliocentric or sun-centered view, or that software actually allows for like a Martian-centered or Jupiter zodiac. It's cool. But if you go there and then you come back to Earth, it defaults to a topocentric or Earth-surfaced rather than geocentric or Earth-centered calculation. And so I had experienced some sessions where I had folks' moon in a different sign in the chart than they were used to, because we're used to geocentric calculations, and just through this weird software, maybe not glitch, but ish, I would get to this like topocentric thing. So I was probably aware of it first from there, but where it really landed for me is I did an eclipse ceremony for one of the blood moons, the tetrad of 2014 to 2015. It was the first one in April of 2014 in Tubac, Arizona, my friend Linda's place, Moon Reach Ranch. And it was late night, the eclipse. I think it was like 3:30 or something. And super powerful. It was a lunar eclipse in Libra, like right with Spica, and some of the other beings were present at the time. And so I gave a long talk, And then we went outside and started a fire and sat around talking story. And, I was trying to figure out how to keep people like in it and entertained until this eclipse began. And it was a long eclipse as well, sometime at like 3 or 3:30 in the morning. What tripped me out, and I had sat with this while I was planning the night and the weeks before, is that the heart of the lunar eclipse that I was seeing in my chart, like the time of it, was different than what I was reading from wonderful astronomy pages like time and date or moon blink, or just newspaper articles about when and where to see this eclipse. And I was like, why is my time wrong? And I later found out it's because my chart was cast for the center of the Earth, but I was watching this thing from the surface of the Earth, right? And then I think, are requested to explore this contemplation of why. Why would we measure from the center of the Earth? And that led me to this kind of musical cosmology I was mentioning before, where this celestial symphony's chord is resonating in the heart of the Earth, and then we experience that vibration because we are Earthlings. There's a passage from The Light of Egypt by Burgoyne, I think, where he speaks of this thing of astronomy and astrology, where astronomy is like a glove and astrology the living hand that wears it. And he gets into this trip about how the planets first and foremost kind of are influencing one another, then how that influences the Earth and she us. And that's right at the heart of this thing, which I think is so beautifully expressed in the truth that we are making these astrological or astronomical measurements in a geocentric chart, not from the surface of Earth where we live and breathe and witness the heavenly happenings, but from the center of Earth. What a trip. What is there? Well, if you reach your hands up to the top of the sky with me right now, you will be reaching towards a different star than I am. And actually, because she moves and spins so quickly, I'm pointing to a different place than I was when I first reached my hands above my head some moments ago. But if you will please with me now travel down through your spine, where do we all connect but in the center of the Earth, in the heart? And this is the above coming down and the below coming up to meet there in my heart and your heart. And I think there's something so beautiful about that. So my challenge when I had this eclipse experience was, well, we must be doing this wrong. Like, why would I not measure from the birthplace, which is on the surface? But it, again, is how we on the surface experience the center. And the center is this global thing, this Earth-wide thing. Not only in a moment's time, but for all moments of time as well. And from the center of the Earth, from the heart of Gaia, in this moment of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction today, April 12th, 2022, if you're into that whole Gregorian trip, it's as if Jupiter was waiting for the moon to move into Virgo, to ingress Virgo, which is, by the way, in the sky, and I think I want to show you this, aligned to the heart of the lion, Regulus. So we'll move to Stellarium, astronomy software. I guess I'll cast this chart for this moment here, 742, or I'll do 753. Locally. But it's not the right place to look at the moon. Why? For one thing, the sun had risen and we can't see. But the moon, and very importantly, it was down below the ground in this moment's time because Taurus was rising here locally. So I'm going to have to go somewhere else in the world. In fact, why don't I look at where in this astro map the moon was on a high to make this point. So this is one of the convenient ways for us to see how the planets were seen from the Earth in any moment, like a birth. And in fact, this is the Virgo moon at the midheaven here through central Russia and down into, I guess, Nepal, through China. So I can see that the moon was near the midheaven in Kathmandu, for example. So I'm going to relocate this chart to Kathmandu. Oh, although, you know what? I'm going to go to Mumbai for the sake of time. No, sorry, I'm not. We'll just let the computer spell for us. And then we've got to look at a ascendant-based chart. So there you go. Scorpio rising in the same moment of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction as experienced in Kathmandu, Nepal, where the nodes were aligned to the horizon. This Saturn at the IC, and the moon about to culminate in the first degree of tropical Virgo. I'm going to see a thing here, just for the sake of the divine science. What happens if we go parallax? Actually, more Virgo. I'm going to learn to crack the code of where that would go in the other direction in the zodiac, but that's something for me to learn on my own time. So let's head over to Nepal. Oh, I can't. Okay, I'm going to India. That will also place the moon quite high. In the same moment of time, there you go. And there's a couple things I wanted to show you here. One is this degree of the tropical zodiac. Oops. Oh, sorry, I'm going to have to do that again. This will work. Okay. Called the first degree of tropical Virgo, is right aligned with Regulus, the heart of the lion, in our day and age. It's actually shifted in 2012, depending on how you do the math, where 150 degrees of celestial longitude, and that is the beginning of tropical Virgo, since we measure celestial longitude from the 0 Aries degree, where the ecliptic, the path of the sun from our point of view, passes over Earth's equator from the south to the north. So for the last decade, this star Regulus, the heart of the lion, has resided in tropical Virgo, which spans from this line here to, this is 15 Virgo, near the haunches or the back of the lion, and then this is 0 degrees tropical Libra, an equinox point where the celestial equator and do I get the celestial equator on? It's been too long. Here, where the celestial equator and the ecliptic again meet. So that happens at 0 Aries and 180 degrees from there. So this point, 0 tropical Libra, is 180 degrees celestial longitude. And the sign which precedes it in the zodiac, Virgo, begins at 150 degrees. 30 degrees or one sign before that, all right? So we can see that the moon has crossed that line in this moment's time. This being the geocentric calculation of that lunar position. So the heart of Earth, viewing the moon at the heart of the lion. And well above, I mean, interestingly, the ecliptic crosses, well, let me say it this way. The heart of the lion, Regulus, is super close to the ecliptic. Just slightly north of the ecliptic. And that's a measurement that's called latitude. Regulus is less than half a degree from the ecliptic plane. Whereas if I looked at a star, like Alphard here, you can see it's much further away from that yellow bit, from that yellow line, the ecliptic plane, that curve. It has a latitude of 22, 23. So Regulus is one of these great kind of ecliptic marker stars, traditionally associated with one of the particular cardinal directions, one of the royal stars. In fact, it's said to be the royal star that rules them all. And the contemplation of the energetic shift or turning of the ages correlation to the star Regulus's procession into the tropical sign of Virgo in 2012, okay, having spent about 2,100 years in Leo, is an amazing thing. It's actually part of Dane Rudgeur's criterion for the turning of the ages. He was also very interested in when Betelgeuse here, this bright star at Orion's shoulder, will move into the tropical sign of Cancer from this projected point of view. That has not happened yet. Right now at 89 degrees celestial longitude, Betelgeuse in the last degree of tropical Gemini. All right, it takes about 72 years for 1 degree of precession on the ecliptic. It's different for stars that are far away, like Betelgeuse is 16 degrees south latitude or south of the ecliptic plane. So it's like all interesting considerations, and I diverge once again. But Pisces should remind us that it's all connected. That's not only for people and hearts and planets and all things, but also for information as well. These mutable signs like Pisces, they are Gemini, Virgo, where the moon was here in the lion's chest, but lion constellation, Virgo sign. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, traditionally called double-bodied signs, we often see as corresponding with learning. I almost said mind, but Pisces is not inclined to learn as much from a mental way as Gemini. And of course, well, mind and brain are very different words. And some would say actually in the beginning, there was the word or the sound would be a more Pisces ways of saying that, or the mind. But it's not mind equals brain. What is Virgo? And again, I'm so interested in charts, like, any chart, when you see the moon in the very first degrees of a sign. In a nativity, it's like, okay, where is that birth time coming from? Because if it says like 1:45 a.m., for example, how do I know that whoever wrote that time down didn't round up from 1:44, and maybe that would actually move the moon from one side of a sign cusp to another? It's an interesting challenge. Going back to a 0 Aries wheel, which will look exactly the same whether I cast this moment for Kathmandu or Richmond, California, or wherever you may be, right? I mean, this is a moment in time, right? There's no debate. Now, again, at 8:27:51 p.m. on the clocks as we do them now in Kathmandu, which is interestingly 5 hours and 45 minutes ahead of Greenwich Mean Time. Or if I do this for Richmond, California, where Taurus was on the rise, the opposite sign, because we're on the opposite side of the world, whereas 7:42:51, 7 hours behind Greenwich Mean or Universal Time. It doesn't matter, right? Like, what is time? The Pisces tends to be inclined to say it's just some human construct. I think Virgo is the sign that would most disagree with that cosmology. Oh, maybe Capricorn. Capricorn being very Saturnian and earthly. Virgo being about systems, right? So yeah, what is time? Is it simply this human construct? And not from an embodied perspective, because the earth spins, right? Causing such incredible hits like sunrise and sunset, and from sunrise to the next, that's 24 hours of time. Now, the hour itself and the minutes, those come from more of an amazing kind of geometrical, magical system, if you will. But the day is quite clear. There's different types of days, like how long will it take for a star to rise again versus the star of ours called sun. But regardless, in the modern astronomical cosmology, that day is the experience of a spinning Earth, or our earthly experience of our planet's rotation. Yeah. And that's a very physical and real thing. It's no construct. Like, whether humans existed here or not, birds would have days, you know? And it matters to a bird, you know. I mean, don't tell that to whoever the bird who's like in its mating protocol that's living in this pine tree out here is singing all night long right now. But most of the birds wait until the morning to chirp, you know what I'm saying? All right. So the year is also very much an astronomical thing. It's no construct just to human beings. Like, we might be the ones who are, I guess, measuring it or naming it or giving numbers to this thing, but numbers pre-exist humans as well. But, you know, a bird is going to migrate according to these seasonal shifts, which are a result of an orbiting Earth whose rotational axis is tilted in respect to her orbital path, you know? Like, that image of time is so real. And in fact, I think we need to release the idea that releasing ourselves from such constructs are going to keep us living in a world of duality and not be able to experience oneness. And that is really getting at the heart of some of what I see or hear in the Celestial Symphony at the time of the chart here cast for the moment of Jupiter conjoined Neptune. In a moment is a very real thing. And that's a very global thing, okay? So why in this moment, and I have no doubt about whether you want to call this 7:42:51 a.m. or sometime past 8 p.m. or whatever, like, it's a moment that Earth experienced from our point of view when Jupiter and Neptune aligned, which hasn't happened for some time, by the way. The last one of these was in the sign of Aquarius, and the moon was there to join the fun, Chiron 2, and that was December 21st, 2009, right? Let's go back from that time, which I may call 2010 for the sake of the math. Well, there were 3 in that year, so 2009 would be much better to say. Going back from 2009, we find 97 was the one before, and 84 before that. So basically, we're seeing a 13-year-ish thing of these consecutive Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions. And let's play that game one more time. So we see that the 3 conjunctions in 2009 were in the sign of Aquarius, and before that in the sign of Capricorn in 97, and before that in the sign of Capricorn, the very first arc minute of Capricorn in 1984. Before that in Sag in 71. 3 conjunctions that year were in Scorpio in 1958. We are in Libra in 1945. Very powerful time on Earth, right? Just the month before, these terrors of the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Here in 1932 in the sign of Virgo. 1920 in Leo. 1920 had 3 of these Leo conjunctions, one of them actually stretching back to September of 1919. Cancer in the conjunctions before that in 1907. Here we are in 1894 in the sign of Gemini with Pluto. 1881, and I think I said 19 when I should have said 18 last, but 1881 in the sign of Taurus with Venus. 1869 in the sign of Aries, and 1856, the last time we had a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces, right? So how long was that? How long between that time and now? Well, we're going to have to do some math. So we add 150 to 1850 to get to 2000. Subtract 6. So we're at 144, and then add 22. So 166 years, if I did that math right. Let's see what happens if we go 166 years from that time. Yeah, 2022. So the math is cool. Let's go back 166 years before that time. And we find as well a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces in the year 1690. And interestingly, it cast the chart for maybe a month later when Venus had come into Pisces to join them there, which is happening now, right? So we could go 166 years before this time also, and perhaps find a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. Something went very wrong in that one. Huh. Oh yeah. So, okay, let me go back 300 years in 3 of these 66-year periods. And here we are, Jupiter conjoined Neptune in Pisces in 1524. So, one of the things that we're looking at in astrology is wheels within wheels and cycles within cycles. And we can see that Jupiter and Neptune conjoin like every 13 years. So what's that? Well, it's hard to get kind of historical information or see too many patterns in a 13-year thing. But what about these 166-year periods of Jupiter and Neptune going all the way through the signs? Should we begin that in Aries? Perhaps. Well, why in Pisces? Because the one today is in Pisces. And why else? Because all the way back to horoscopic astrology's advent, Jupiter is said to be the dispositor, or the Lord, or the home landlord of this house called Pisces, right? So people use this word ruler now. Back in the day, domicile lord, like literally, like I own that house of Pisces. And like since Neptune's discovery in 1856 or sometime thereafter, the sign of Pisces was kind of gifted to Neptune. What would Jupiter say? So we have this like heritage, long standing of Jupiter and Pisces, and from a much more modern context, Neptune in Pisces, and also Venus in Pisces reaches way back, which is a significant part of the happening today. And it was interesting to see, like here, Venus is in Aquarius with Jupiter and Neptune meeting in early degrees. And so she's going to get in on that fun with all 3 in the sign of Pisces. There's a lot of Pisces there in 1524. Let's go 166 years from there again, and we will find our way to 1690 when Jupiter and Neptune conjoined in Pisces, and Venus got in on that one too. A lot of Pisces in that chart, right? Let's go 166 years from there, and we find our way from 1890 to this Pisces Jupiter Neptune conjunction in 1856. That's the last time they met there. And Venus here in Aquarius, certainly close enough to get in on that Piscean planet party before Jupiter or Neptune would leave the sign. Mercury around for that one too. And that brings us to this time now, where their conjunction itself actually features Venus in sign. So we can look at this 166-year period And now we have, in this longer rhythm, perhaps the opportunities to widen our gaze and to see more particular patternings. I will say that Adam Summers' transmission around this. So where is the best place to find Adam's work? I feel like he renamed his podcast, which was for so long the Holes in the Heavens podcast. Let me actually just find a page for Adam to refer you to. I imagine you actually are familiar with his work. It is so great. Huh. So somehow I'm having some serious internet issues. Okay, hold on. Okay, so holestoheavens.com. Let me just show that page on the screen here. Yeah, Adam Summers is an amazing astrologer. And I felt this article that he wrote on the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which I'm actually not seeing right here, because he is so amazingly prolific. Maybe I'll hit to the blog page. Anyway, I'll just share that it hits a little bit harder than a lot of what we are hearing from astrologers in regards to this Pisces Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. These are looking more like podcast episodes than blog posts to me. I know that I shared a link on my Facebook timeline to this transmission, so I guess I could go there to find our way back to this. Oh, right. No, this is the article. Sorry. A slippery slope on the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction with a little of Uranus, right? So Uranus and Taurus. And here's a link, which I will, once this video is through, post. Actually, let me just pause my share. I think I can do it right now for this live broadcast here at YouTube. Can I comment? Oh, yeah, say something. Hello. Say something else. Here's this link to Adam Summers' brilliant Jupiter-Neptune conjunction transmission. Okay, with a bit of a warning, I guess, you are going to maybe feel the rose-colored glasses of this transit yanked from your eyes, should you choose to go to that place. Because Adam's just looking at this historically and tuning into the so-called fourth turnings, which have really turned the whole world over, and it seems to correspond to these Pisces, Jupiter, Neptune conjunctions. Adam's referencing especially the times when Uranus is also in Taurus. Let's play this game again. Back 66 years, back 166 years, and we find at the last Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces, we also have Taurus, Uranus and Taurus in 1856. Can I ask for 166? No. Back 100 years and back 66 years. And we get to 1690 for a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces. And we find Uranus in Taurus. What mystery is this? Well, let's see if we can unfold that through our cosmic calculations of wheels within wheels. But let's go back for one more. So 60 years, 66 years, and 100 years. And we find Jupiter conjoin Neptune in the sign of Pisces with Taurus, right? Uranus and Taurus here in the very last degree and retrograding back into Taurus. So it should be interesting to go back one more of these 166-year periods and see if the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces that time featured Uranus in Taurus, and the answer is no. In Gemini. But check this out, right? Where are Jupiter and Neptune? They're here in the very first degree of Pisces. So if you've been tracking this, as we go back 166 years, you'll see also that Jupiter and Neptune were in earlier degrees of Pisces each of these times. So let's do one more, and we'll go back 160 years before then to the year of 1191 and find that the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction at that time was in the sign of Aquarius, right? And Uranus in Gemini. And what do we see? About 13 years between consecutive Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions. So there's this Aquarius conjunction in 1191, late 1191. We should expect to see one in 1204 or 1205, about 13 years later. And there it is, 1204 in the sign of Pisces, but now Uranus in Leo. Okay, so there's this other paradigm. I'm going to trace this one back by going 100 years and 66 years. And there's these Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions in Pisces, where kind of during that trip of 166-year rhythm, Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions in Pisces, we find Uranus in Leo. But for this current one, right, like today, Jupiter and Neptune conjoin in Pisces, Uranus in Taurus, in the kind of middle degrees, right? And you'll find that Jupiter and Neptune conjoined around 24 Pisces. Well, let's go to the next one. So here's 66 and 100 years of Jupiter and Neptune will next conjoin in the sign of Pisces. And look, in the very last degree, Uranus is in Taurus. Okay, well, let's go on 166 years from then. And we find that actually the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction will be in Aries, with Uranus in Taurus. Okay, well, we could go 13 years before then and find a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces. Uranus in Donde? where are you? Oh, in Pisces. Okay, intriguing. But this is like a different synod, which means meeting of the Jupiter-Neptune thing, okay, or song, than of this particular one. Because we see that the synod's moving through 12 signs is 166 years, right? And again, when we move 166 years from now, we find our way to this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction at the very last degree of Pisces. That's like the last one for this particular space of the polyrhythm. And then it moves into Aries. So there's this other wheel, greater wheel. So we get 13 years between the Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions, basically moving from one sign to the next, right? Well, what's 13 years times 12 signs? Okay, the answer to that, by the way, is 156, not 166. And neither of these 13 years or 166-year periods that we've been investigating are exact, right? So we'd have to get into a much deeper level of the math to really unpack this thing. But another important truth that we've seen, and I'm actually interested in tracking it down, so we're going to go back in time one more time, is how long does it take one of these Jupiter and Neptune synods? It's like one of the spokes of its 12-spoked wheel to move through a sign, as each of these times it's processing or moving forward through the design of the zodiac. So bear with me here for a little bit more math play, and then I'll bring it back to this moment now. But see, this is, for me, one of the greatest opportunities of astrology. We never want to do astrology as a way out, okay, which is running away from the moment now. or, you know, blaming our idiosyncrasies on our chart, right? I'm not saying that the chart does not participate with our idiosyncrasies, but I don't have to behave in such a way that I was taught Sun square Saturn, a feature of my own nativity, means, right? Like I can evolve that expression into something else, and I'm much more less likely capable of doing so if I'm fixated into this blame game of I'm this way because of this part of my chart. That's astrology as a way out, as is running away from this moment now into the future or the past. But the gift of this study of wheels within wheels and cycles within cycles is to come back to the now with more information. So it's going to be harder for us to glean information from the future, although it's worth a look, than it is from the past. Although, and this is a huge part of these Pisces conjunctions, and certainly today, why should you trust any history book? Okay, so let's trace this thing down. The last one of this particular spoke of the Pisces Jupiter wheel will be in the sign of Pisces in 2188. All right, I'm going to actually put that here so I don't forget it. And then let's go look for the first one. So we know 166 years before that is what? 2022. That's now, right? So I don't have to do that, but let's go 166 years before here. We've done this a few times now. We find 1856. Okay, well, that's Civil War, y'all. Let's go back before then to this 1690 conjunction. And I actually don't want to like speak too much about the history. I haven't personally taken a deep enough dive into that to, I think, speak much about it. But, you know, here's the roots for you to go research. Check out 1856. Check out, oh, I just missed saying one, so let me go there. Check out 1690. Check out 1524. Check out 1358, where Jupiter and Neptune met in the very first degree of Pisces. Okay, so December 25th, 1357. And see if you can find a correlation between those happenings. Check out the great work called Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas, who I imagine explored the periodicity of these Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions. Now, if we just look at this frequency of or periodicity or rhythm of 13 years, it's hard to see much in that pattern, but we can, right? But what about this thing? Oh, we really like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right? That rhythm. Where you get 12 of these conjunctions in between. And I guess you get it for how many times? So let's subtract 2188. Let's subtract 13. I'm going to do 1358. So you're right there at the edge from this number. And we see that this particular kind of spoke will move through one sign over the course of about 830 years. Divide that by 166. And we find, so there's like 5 of Jupiter and Neptune conjunctions in a sign before it will move into the next sign. So watch this. I'm going to go back 13 years before this time. And we're going to find a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Aquarius. Okay. Well, that same one would have moved through the sign of Aquarius, meeting. I'm gonna go back 166 years before that one. And we find Jupiter and Neptune actually conjoining in Capricorn, right? So that this conjunction in Aquarius, I'll call it like the first Aquarian conjunction of the Jupiter Neptune synod in the sign of Aquarius for this particular spoke of their 12-spoked wheel. And how long does it take? We're either going to get 5 of these in the sign of Aquarius, or since this one began like deeper into the sign, I'm guessing maybe only 4. And let's do that. So here's 166 years later. And that same Aquarius conjunction for Jupiter and Neptune is now in the last degree of that face, or decan, or 10-degree division of Aquarius. And then 166 years later, their Aquarian conjunction further along in the sign, about halfway through. So there's number 3 in Aquarius. And 166 years later, we find that they can join deep into the sign, but there's still enough room after this 4th for a 5th in that sign, it would appear. 166 years later, and we get Jupiter and Neptune conjoined 26 and a half. And that makes me feel like maybe they'll get 6 in that sign. Let's see, 166 years later, and we find Jupiter and Neptune conjoin in the 1st degree. Oh, the very last minutes of Aquarius. Okay, so they actually experienced, I think, if I did that math right, 6 conjunctions in the sign of Aquarius before moving into Pisces. Or will experience, because that takes us, you can see, into 2176. Okay. Now, I do not have the power of the vocabulary necessary to express how part of the spoke will move from Aquarius to Pisces while another part of it remains there. The cosmic language, it just gets a little bit deeper than I'm capable of holding. Or I guess, let me say it this way, like it's here, but there's no way for me to get that out right now. We'd really have to take hours and hours and hours and like a deep study of this cycle to see a thing that, or for me to share a thing that I'm seeing here. Anyway, there's some important truths. Okay, so 5 times 166 is this long period of 830 years. We've seen the 166-year period between consecutive conjunctions of Jupiter and Neptune in the same sign. We've seen the 13-year periods between consecutive Jupiter and Neptune conjunctions, which basically go from one sign to the next. So 13 years ago, we had one in Aquarius, and before 13 years before then in Capricorn, and Sagittarius 13 years before then, and Scorpio 13 years before then. It's not exactly 13 years, or this isn't exactly 166, but we could divide 166 by 12, where we're going to find 13.8, closer to 14 years, okay? And that's actually closer to the periodicity of the Jupiter-Neptune cycle. I'm eyeing my shelves for another work on the synodic cycles by Georgia Stathis called, well, I'm sad I brought that up without remembering the name of the text right now, and I'm not seeing it on the shelf, but it's a great one to refer to in regards to the periodicities of these outer planet synodic cycles, synod meaning meetings. And it's just a wonderful book in general, so I'm going to have to look up the title for it to share with you here. Cosmos and Psyche is a kind of a really amazing work on outer planet happenings. Oh, what is it called? Something in time. Hold on. Let me just pause my share and go to the web and find the title of this text. Pushing Through Time. Okay. Georgia Stathis, you can find at starcycles.com. Pushing Through Time is the synodic cycles and their developing phases. It's a great reference place, again, for the periodicity or the rhythm of these conjunctions. Does she even say it here? No. Okay. But in Georgia also is really tuned into financial cycles. It's part of Georgia's work. So that text gives you kind of another view of a quote unquote history we aren't always tuning into. Perhaps you saw when we visited just briefly Adam Summers' page at holestoheavens.com before, this information about Bitcoin. Like that's been part of Adam's study and work recently. And I believe practice, which is a word we really want to get back to. And so I imagine Adam's been tracking or attempting to track financial cycles, probably here and in all cycles too. Why do I say attempting to track? Not in any way judging Adam's ability as an astrologer, which I honor is actually very advanced and great. I think Adam's a wonderful astrologer, but because once again, why should we believe the history books? And I will tell you, especially in regards to the financial systems, where the hidden history will reveal basically, well, what is the proper term? Absolute totalitarian world dominance, okay? Which I'm sorry to say seems to be linked into this cycle. I want to return to something that we had seen in Adam's article, and we had seen as we've been going back 166 years to track these consecutive Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions in the sign of Pisces. And we saw it takes about 5 of these to move from the first degree of a sign to the last degree of a sign, or early degrees to latter degrees of a sign before moving into the next sign. And that this would be the 4th of 5. And so we have one more Jupiter-Neptune conjunction 166 years from now, which if you'll remember, we saw was in the very last degree of Pisces, and that will be their last conjunction in this particular place before this spoke of the wheel, as I'm calling it, of the Jupiter-Neptune wheel moves into the sign of Aries. And it's intriguing to see that the Scorpio moon at that time in 2188 will be aligned to the south node of the moon today, and that it will be a Scorpio full moon, right? So moon and sun aligned to the nodes, and that's intriguing, and I could go on, but I think I want to be here now. We do see, however, Uranus and Taurus. I also see, by the way, that with the sun on the opening sextile to Jupiter and Neptune, that it'll only be a few months before they station retrograde. And I'm wondering, I'm going to look at Jupiter retrograde and Jupiter direct, if they can join again, and if they do so in Aries. No, they do not have 3 conjunctions because Jupiter stations direct before getting back to conjoin Neptune again. And if they did, they would all take place in the sign of Pisces anyway, because Jupiter and Neptune, when conjoined and traveling together, will also kind of retrograde together too. And that opens up an interesting astronomical place. But let's look back to this coming conjunction of Jupiter. What? Oh, wrong button. Of Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces, that's 2188. Or, since we can't glean too much, we can only envision that far into the future unless you're channeling your future selves. Maybe looking back to this one in 1856, where we see them together in Pisces, and only one conjunction at that time to Venus, Mercury huddled together in Aquarius. Mercury will ingress Pisces literally the next day, and Venus not too far behind. I did 1 year, not 1 day. So that she will eventually conjoin both Neptune and then Jupiter in Pisces before either of those planets leave the sign, which is happening now too, yeah? I don't know what's happening here. Jupiter and Neptune conjunction, Mercury at the gate. Here's the next day into Pisces, and Venus is moving kind of quickly here, probably 5 days or 4 days later into Pisces. And Venus will conjoin Neptune, and then Venus will conjoin Jupiter, right? I mean, that's very similar to what's happening now, except for a significant difference between this current Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces at this time in 2022, in respect to the last Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces in 1856, is that Venus is already in Pisces, has been in Pisces, thank you very much, well established in Pisces. And while we know we have history of Jupiter and recent history of Neptune in relationship with the sign of Pisces. Perhaps the Venus association, where Venus is said to be exalted in the sign of Pisces, goes back even further. So this is an intriguing thing, and we've actually seen that Venus has been in or near Pisces for each of these last Jupiter, Neptune, Pisces conjunctions for this particular spoke of their synodic wheel, right? And this being the fourth of 5, separated by about 166 years. And speaking of Venus, which sometimes speaks of Taurus, we bring our minds to Taurinus or Uranus and Taurus at the same time. So why? Because Uranus's path around the zodiac is 84 years, all right? Which is an amazingly, well, astrological number. I want to get a calculator up here. Why? Because 7 planets are wanderers, planetas, 7 visible lights, right? Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the days of the week, the alchemical metals, all these things, 7 planetas times 12 signs equals 84. So how amazing that Uranus, who wasn't known back to the 7 and the 12, right? That goes all the way back, has an orbital period of 84 Earth years. That's a trippy thing, right? So let's test that one. We're going to go 84 years from today. And we will find that Uranus is kind of right in the zone of the current placement, right? I mean, I could get more exact by looking at the periodicity of Uranus returns. So here's Uranus in the same place of the zodiac in 2106, yeah, which is 84 years from 2022. It's actually 84 years minus a couple weeks, which is an intriguing thing. 84 years from then in 2106 is 2190. Well, here we get 2189, right? So orbits are elliptical and not circular, and it takes numbers like this. We have to remember they are averages, and we average ellipses as images of circles, the heavenly form. Anyway, what's 84 times 2? And the answer is 168. So while that's not equal to 166, for slow moving planets, especially like Neptune, but also Uranus, who spends on average 7 years in a sign, these 166 year beats of this Jupiter-Neptune rhythm that we found are going to agree with a double beat for Uranus moving around, right? Which is Earth-Uranus. So Earth, Jupiter, Neptune, 12 of those are like, maybe a better way, well, Earth, Sun, Uranus. It's hard. It's like, again, I lack the language. But this rhythmic connection of these planets is so important. Here I'm in this musical model again. Well, music's been part of my own personal, I guess, history. But it also reaches all the way back into the sacred sciences. So harmony, which is number in time, and geometry, number in space, are necessary for us to truly integrate the teachings of astronomy, which is number in space and time. This is according to the quadrivium tradition, something that I know Adam Summer, actually speaking of Adam, and I are both like deeply entangled in as students of life. That goes all the way back to number itself, by the way. So we see some interesting numbers like 13, more like 14, 166. These longer periods of time we saw like 166 times 5 or 830 years. We could multiply that by 12, I think, and get to another very interesting period. Those are intriguing numbers. So much we can do with these wheels within wheels within wheels, but there's something very important about this particular Pisces spoke of the Jupiter-Neptune wheel that also features Taurus-Uranus. if you'll remember, I mean, we've been on some really strange and now quite theoretical and even mathematical and academic and kind of mind space, which is not necessarily, especially when we're tuning into the Pisces design, the place to be. So I'm going to bring it back into nature. But I hope you'll remember that when we were looking at a different, what I'll call a different spoke of the Jupiter-Neptune wheel, we saw Pisces conjunctions that featured Leo, Uranus. Well, that's an intriguing one. And we could do all sorts of things and find Jupiter and Neptune conjunctions in the sign of Pisces with Uranus. Maybe not in all of the signs, but I bet you if we did enough research, we could see that's true in these different rhythms. So we are currently in the fourth of 5 Jupiter, Neptune, Pisces conjunctions, which have a periodicity or rhythm of 166 years, that all feature Uranus in the sign of Taurus. I say that, and I want to just confirm again that the last of these 5 Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions of this particular spoke of their wheel in the sign of Pisces, which happens in 2188, also features Uranus and Taurus. And yes, that's true. And I'm sorry, I know we did this, but I'm not writing things down. I want to also go back. So here's the 1856 Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, Uranus and Taurus. And we go back, and here is the... Oh, I did bad math. Anyway, yes, they track all the way back, or I could just go now. So we saw it's 830 years for their kind of 5 conjunctions in the sign. This is the 4th of the 5th. So if I go back 664 years from now, there's 664. I think we will find quickly the first of these Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions in the sign of Pisces. Oh, right. So that's the first one actually featured Uranus in Gemini. And then 166 years after that, we get the first of the Jupiter-Neptune Pisces conjunctions of what I'm calling this particular spoke of their wheel with Uranus and Taurus. This same Jupiter-Neptune spoke will move into Aries in 332 years from now, and they will agree, like Uranus will stay in Taurus from some of those, and those will be particularly interesting. Now, obviously, since Neptune is not visible to the naked eye, Neptune does not have roots in the history of our tradition. And so, once again, while many modern astrologers associate Neptune with the sign of Pisces, that's a rather new convention. Traditionally, Jupiter is the quote-unquote ruler of the sign of Pisces, and Venus, then and now, is said to be the honor guest in that sign, and Venus said to be exalted in the sign of Pisces. Some argue that the exaltations predate the domicile lord system from the Thema Mundi, one of Hermes' many gifts to us. But in modern times, and I'm more inclined to the old way, but in modern times, Pisces is said to be ruled by Neptune, right? And there is something that reaches all the way back, at least in the medieval tradition, that would say that if a planet's in the sign opposite its domicile or its house, then it is in exile or detriment, right? So that if Neptune rules Pisces, it has a hard time in Virgo. That traditionally is said of Jupiter, right? Jupiter rules Pisces, said to be in detriment in the sign of Virgo on the opposite side. Now, there is a decent debate in modern times about whether that was even part of the Hellenistic tradition. It's not part of the Vedic or Jyotish tradition. Planets in detriment, as it's called, or exile. They certainly look at planets in their fall when they are in the sign opposite the house of their exaltation. So Venus said to be in fall in the sign of Virgo. There's some debate about whether the Hellenistic astrologers had a hard time with planets in signs opposite their domicile or not. And it's an interesting thing to look into. Certainly in the medieval tradition and in the Renaissance and for much of Western astrology, planets opposite the sign that they are said to rule is a challenging place, and planets opposite the sign where they are said to be exalted, also challenging the sign where they are said to be in fall. Why do I share all of this? Well, that's something that in modern astrology is said about Uranus in the sign of Taurus. Modern astrologers associate Scorpio as the sign of Uranus's exaltation, and Taurus, therefore, is the sign of Uranus's fall. While I'm there, I just want to share there's a very important thing here, which brings me back to this geocentric Virgo moon at the time of this Pisces Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which is that Moon is said to be exalted in Taurus, while Mercury is said to be exalted in Virgo. And so Moon and Mercury have a mutual reception by exaltation at this time of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction here on Mars's day. And where I am locally, Mars's hours of Mars's day. And I really want to get into just how much Mars you see in this placement of Jupiter and Neptune. Because while Pisces is said to be Jupiter's place and the exaltation of Venus, they are in a particular degrees of the sign of Pisces, which are said to be the face of Mars or the decan of Mars. Mars traditionally is said to rule the last 10 degrees of Pisces, the final face of Pisces, and also in the bounds or the terms of Mars, at least in the Egyptian system. So let me show you that. Here's Jupiter and Neptune. This little dash shows us that they are in Mars's bounds, that they are in Mars's face. This is according to the Chaldean order. Other systems would, well, either call that Mars or Pluto. I'm also interested in just looking at the Ptolemaic bounds or terms rather than the so-called Egyptian system, where, yeah, we find these degrees of Pisces are also said to be the bounds of Mars. So regardless, there's this interesting Martian connection of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction at this time. This is a rather Martian time on Earth in regards to the mass media, which, by the way, is a Pisces thing, as all eyes are on this war. And take a peek at this moment in an astrocartographical expression. And indeed, we see that in the moment of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, that they were co-setting here on this line that's moving through Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Serbia, Albania. They had just recently set in Ukraine, and maybe an hour before their precise conjunction, they had co-set in Ukraine. And that would mean, by the way, that these Jupiter-Neptune setting lines, and this is always true for a location that's west of an astrocartography line, it places the planets in the cadent house associated with the angle. And so this is Jupiter and Neptune in the 6th house in Ukraine. I want to cast this chart, relocate it to Kiev, for example. I mean, even saying that word out loud, though, subjects this video to censorship, doesn't it? Let me put our feet on the ground here and get this out of a 0 Aries wheel, cast a porphyry chart. And there you see that Jupiter-Neptune very close to the descendant. That's what the map showed us, okay? But on the 6th house side, okay, intriguing. And a Libra rising chart with this exalted Venus in the 6th. All right, well, what is that about? As long as we're there, let's relocate this thing to a place not too far away, where we see also 6th house placements and Libra rising. And then I'm going to go to a place that's a little closer to where I sit. and find Cancer rising in DC at the time of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, with them up high in the chart, but in the 9th sign, 10th house, Venus in the 9th, either way you put that cat, and Cancer rising with this Virgo moon. All right, so what? All right, now in true Gemini fashion, I'm climbing too many branches at once. So let me share a Gemini prayer I have, which is, may I remember always these many branches I'm called to climb all emanate from the same trunk. And this is the place where we bring it home, and probably a reminder for me to also take kind of the conclusions part of one of these long journeys and share that as a video unto itself. That would be like the article I would write if I did all this work before. But the truth is, if I wasn't live right now, this would be like a 2-week journey, and me looking into the history of all of these times and trying to come towards conclusions. And I do, again, value the conclusion that Adam Summers found in his journey, though I also want to honor that one of the great medicines or magics of the Pisces Jupiter Neptune conjunction with Venus in the house as well is hope. Or let me use a more powerful word, though it scares many, faith. Dream, vision. So that's what we're hearing about, right? This is the great time to vision board and do your thing. And yes, okay, but also Jupiter, who expands things, expanding this long period of Pisces in the sign, Neptune in the sign of Pisces. What is it? What is it about? And I mean, just honor as well that this is, we'd have to go back 160 years or for the 160 years to get Jupiter and Neptune to conjoin in Pisces again. Their next one will be in Aries, interestingly, where the sun is today. And their last one, as we saw, was in Aquarius, interestingly, where Saturn and Mars are today, right? So in other words, 166 years is a long time. You don't get a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, but once in a lifetime, right? If you're lucky, you might not at all, because 166 years is a long time. What is it that they're doing this with Uranus? I want to go back 166 years one more time and show you this truth of their conjunction in the sign of Pisces at that time was sextile with Uranus. I mean, almost exactly in 1856, right? Where you see Jupiter and Neptune conjoin 1813 Pisces, Uranus at the time 1758 Taurus. Jupiter would have sextiled Uranus shortly before this conjunction with Neptune, and Uranus would sextile Neptune shortly after. All right. Let's go back to the one before that, so 66 and 100 years before, and now we're just looking at these, oops, I messed that up. 200 years and 2 times 66 years, and Jupiter can join Neptune in the sign of Pisces. Now having 60 plus 70, or sorry, about 70 degrees separation, 70.5 degrees. Well, that's much closer to a quintile, a fifth of the zodiac, which draws a pentacle, or the 5-pointed star. Okay, let's go back to the one before this, the Pisces Jupiter Neptune conjunction before this, and look at their relationship at that time in 1524 with Uranus. And this, as we had seen, is the first of this Pisces Jupiter Neptune conjunction of this particular spoke of their wheel in the sign of Pisces. It's the second one of those, but the first one that also featured Uranus and Taurus, because the one before Uranus was in Gemini, and they had that square, and this is pretty square as well. Okay, but it's actually a square minus 7-ish degrees, right? I mean, it's closer to 80 than 90, closer to a binovile or the ninth harmonic. Okay, well, let's look at today. Because I mean, I could get into this whole discourse now on harmonics or vibrational astrology. But that's going to take us into a whole nother ocean, right? But it's part of this thing. I think I'll just kind of cut to the chase and say this. What are you looking at in this shape of Uranus with Jupiter, Neptune today? Well, by sign, Pisces and Taurus are sextile. But here we're looking at 50 degrees, almost exactly, just a little bit less, which is much closer to a seventh of a circle, or the sceptile, which is less than 51.5 degrees. This, interestingly, is a never-ending number, okay? This 6 at the end here on this calculator is actually a 571428, 571428, 571428, 571428 forever. Okay. So it's like trying to show a pattern, but it doesn't quite perfect, if you will. 7 in the number magic tradition is often referred to as the first virgin, 11 being the next of these numbers that will not divide the circle of 360 degrees equally. Like 2 divides into 180, the opposition, 3 into 120, the trine, 4 into 90, the square, 5 into 72, not whole sign, but the quintile, 6 into 60, the sextile, 7 into this weird thing. And this is one of the reasons why I suggest 7s are about weird things. And, including, by the way, we see the sceptiles prevalent in people's metaphysical or, like extraterrestrial experiences, mediumship, things that get us like kind of out of this space, which itself is kind of a Neptunian, right? Like otherworldly, mystical waters, and Uranian, right? Kind of sudden, freaky, out of the box. It's like a combo of those things. And I think that combo is maybe most expressed in these sceptiles, which is actually heating up. Because again, the sceptile is not 49 whatever degrees, it's 51.4-ish. So let's see if this magic thing will let me move forward to the Uranus-Neptune sceptile. Oh, good. Thank you, Astro Gold. You're amazing. I can move back, by the way, to a Jupiter-Uranus sceptile, which has already happened. And that was on April Fool's Day. That's fun. The day of an Aries new moon conjoined Chiron, and we can go on and on and on, and the wheels within wheels. But I can look forward also to the Uranus sceptile Neptune. I'm going to write it this way for the sake of speed, but say it's important for us to speak the name of the faster moving planet first. That helps us see time, which is not a construct, it's real. And we get that the Uranus-Neptune sceptile of this about 51.4 degrees is here on June 9th. Jupiter will have followed Mars into the sign of Aries at that point. It's interesting to see Venus so close to Taurus at that particular time. Wheels within wheels. What about this grand trine, the exact moon-sun trine, and moon carrying the light of the sun to Saturn and Aquarius to complete this grand trine you see forming on the screen at this time in June of this year. Anyway, there's something about this time between the April 1st, 2022 Jupiter-Uranus sceptile and the June 9th, 2022 Uranus-Neptune sceptile that I think will speak of super freaky, out of the box, metaphysical, weird, potential, transformative accidents coming to us from the space of the otherworldly and the dreams. So the great UFO landing, perhaps, though I gotta say, with my research, if I see a UFO land in my backyard, I will first have to ask, is this real? Or like, are these real extraterrestrials or simply, I don't know, oh, the hidden government effing with me? I don't know, maybe you have looked into the rumors and whispers around a potential fake alien landing, which I think could be as alive in this kind of design as a authentic one. And I'm not predicting that that's going to happen in these months anyway. I think we are seeing what is already happening and what has been happening, right? So, conjunction is a moment's time, but the energy of that conjunction is happening before the actual alignment does, right? So we have a time of application of Jupiter arriving to meet Neptune. We have a time of separation of Jupiter releasing from that position. And they're very different things, right? So we are now in this moment where here I am at 11:10 a.m. Oh, which reminds me, I've got to get to work. Wait, this is my job. I love it, but I have a reading coming up in a second. So let me make sure my screen is not being shared as I check my calendar real quick. This would be the fast way for me to do that. Sorry to break away. Okay, cool. I've got a little bit more. This is one of the many times I'm like, I'll just do a short thing. Right. It's so impossible for me because I really love to explore these many limbs of our cosmic tree. And I like to teach, I like to teach as I transmit. I think it helps us have our feet on the ground. It helps you. If I feel like if I show you why I'm getting to the things I'm getting to, or showing you the things that interest me for trying to get to something, which will help, I feel, you get to your thing through your astrology, then I'm doing more than simply saying, hey, this is what this is, go do it. Now, the other point I think we could very beautifully argue for, like, what if I tell you that if you're Pisces rising, you better take this thing personally? Or if you are Aquarius rising, this is about addressing your needs. If you're Capricorn rising, this is going to require you to dream into a more clear way to share and speak those needs and dreams into this world. If I told you that for the Sagittarius folks, this design is to help you tune into your ancestry, where we're coming from, but also those things that we bury away, especially in regards to the trauma of our youth. That if you were born with Scorpio on the rise, you are required to create artistically so you can see what this conjunction means for you. And you might see it playing out with your creations, especially your children, if you have some around. That if you were born with Libra on the rise, which places this Pisces conjunction, as it did in the moment in Ukraine and Moscow, in the 6th, this is really about practice. And I'm going to leave that there because I will end this long transmission with speaking more about why I feel this moment was waiting for the moon's Virgo ingress. Were you born with Virgo on the rise? This is in the 7th, and expect some strangeness in your relations, right? But all things are relations. How do I relate to this cup of tea? Your relationship to relationship itself is under review, not in this only in this moment, but a seed is planted for 13 years and 166 and 830. Well, maybe not. Were you born with Leo on the rise, placing this Pisces thing in the 8th, I think you are required to explore this idea of ego death. And can you connect to the one without releasing the me. But I don't feel that that is your design. In fact, I will say that as you honor yourself as a unique and beautiful ray of the one only light, you are doing more service to oneness. And so the eighth often speaks of the sign we must slay for us to walk the path of our design, but also a place where we will be reborn, or that we can rebirth if we choose to walk the path. And that's the first, in an honorable way. Honor is such an important word for Leo. I think this is such an important time for us to reclaim the spirit of sovereignty, which has itself been under attack through, well, what I experience is media manipulation and intentional, conscious, magical misuse of collective compassion over the course of the previous years. Were you born with Cancer on the rise, you will find that the sign of Pisces is your ninth. And the question is, how am I called to sit and pray in a church called boundarylessness, poetry, mysticism, and compassion, for me to learn more about the science of water being nurturing equals watering a thing to help it grow? Were you born with Gemini on the rise, then this conjunction is in your 10th sign, and this speaks in ways to your purpose. I was born with Gemini rising, and I'm like a good example in this long moment, which is what we're going on more than an hour and a half here, I think, since I hit broadcast, of you might want to consider how your word is being received in such a way that it actually can make productive waves in this world. Because when we speak too poetically or mystically, sometimes we are not offering the fruits that we are attempting to. Guilty? But what is guilt? Okay, what about if we find our way to Taurus on the rise, where Pisces is the 11th place? Consider what it might mean for you to fully embody your path, were you to have a mystical community. Also understand that community experiences and social experiences are here to help you develop the tool of a type of intuition that's less psychic than it is embodied. So really sentiently, somatically experiencing in your body what places like or venues like social media do. Yeah. And coming back to teach us about these kinds of things, like, hey, less screen time would be good for you. Hate to say that hypocritically 90 minutes into a transmission about one conjunction in a chart. For the Aries folks, Pisces is the 12th sign. In much of this mystical out of the world, and actually given the Martian focus of these particular degrees of the sign of Pisces, where Jupiter and Neptune now meet, I think making sure that this commitment you have to this cause is being inspired by your vision, not the vision you are being told to have. And so now let me try or attempt to summarize many of these adventures we've been on. And I'm going to leave out the why or what or the mechanism of the thing. Oh, let me add one other bit to this. Something very particular about this particular Pisces, Jupiter, Neptune, particular conjunction in the particular sign of Pisces, which isn't particular at all, is that sceptile to Uranus versus the sextile 166 years before, or the quintile 166 years before that, or the binovile 166 years before that, or the square 166 years before that. Something in this sceptile offers the opportunity for the weird, the out there, and the necessity for focus and practice. If we want to take the immeasurable and bring it into this manifest world and do something with it, it's going to take some discipline. But that's a really challenging word, especially when we're swimming in Pisces seas. That can be transmuted through, or realigned through this deepening that is offered in words like devotion, practice, your yoga. So that sceptile is a huge piece of this puzzle. Another piece is this. We are experiencing this Jupiter conjunction, one of the most visible planets to the naked eye, right? The most visible planet to the naked eye besides who? The sun, the moon, and Venus. This is the time of Jupiter's heliacal rise. Now, I have not yet experienced Jupiter's Pisces morning star rays in my rods, okay? But I have had reports from the southern hemisphere of Jupiter morning star. Pisces is a much more visible sign in the southern hemisphere because there it rises straight, where here in the northern hemisphere rather crooked. This is also why Pisces is the along with Aries, the fastest sign to rise in the northern hemisphere, and therefore the least common ascendant in a birth chart. And yet I see them all the time. Why? Because the Pisces ascendant is inclined to walk a path of mysticism. And this conjunction is encouraging us all to. Jupiter's heliacal rise in the sign of Pisces speaks to a great potential gift of this particular spoke. I'm just realizing I forgot to hit record. Well, I'm glad this is at least live at a place that I can share, unless they take it away because I said a couple of questionable words. That speaks so much to the great challenges of the time that's also in this design. I need to do one more bit of astronomical research because I'm interested in seeing if the Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions within this particular Pisces spoke of this wheel 166 years before, I want to see where Jupiter and Neptune were in regards to the sun. And I think the answer is, drats, I missed it. I think the answer is they were conjoined last time. Okay, so last time Jupiter and Neptune of this particular spoke conjoined in the sign of Pisces 166 years-ish ago. They were 11 degrees from Sun. I'm going to go to the one before that, 166 years before, where we will find that their conjunction was actually on the evening star side and too close to the sun to be seen. So Jupiter and Neptune at that time were under the beams. If we go back 166 years, I can already see this pattern unfold where they likely were visible morning or evening stars during their conjunction. And yes, this is true, almost a full sign from Aquarius, and especially in the northern hemisphere of Pisces, it's an amazingly visible evening sign, right? So this is part of what the School of Earth Astrology, which is very tuned to visible astronomical astrology, sees as incredibly important, crucial even, that there is this transformation in these 166-year conjunctions of Jupiter and Neptune in the sign of Pisces that is moving from visible evening star to invisible evening star to the least visible, which is when planets are conjoined the sun. Okay. Here they're on the morning star side in 1856, but only 11 degrees from the sun, and maybe in the southern hemisphere for Jupiter at this time, but maybe not. That it's not 11 degrees, it's 9 for Jupiter to have heliacal rise and be visible. Certainly from a global perspective, not at all seen, where at this conjunction now, we have Jupiter and Neptune conjoined a sign away from the sun. And this offers a great visibility. It also makes me wish that I had woken up on this clear day well before the sun did to go experience Jupiter in the sky with my eyes. And tomorrow I will be setting, though it's not a Piscean thing to do, an alarm clock. And I bet you I will wake up before it rings to drive out to a reservoir nearby and really experience this Pisces Jupiter above the waters. And, you know, Neptune is just never visible. And this is one of the reasons why I think we've lost the importance of visibility in astrology. Like many astrologers begin these days with the nodes, which you can kind of learn to see in the sky with your eyes if you learn to see the ecliptic and watch the moon cross twice a month. But they don't have physical bodies. And then many astrologers these days start with Pluto. You can never see with your naked eye, right? Neptune, this is true for Neptune too. Actually, I just received Neptune's light to my own eye through a telescope for the first time around December solstice 2020, when Jupiter and Saturn conjoined in Aquarius. Galileo, it said, saw and recorded Neptune. But this hasn't been happening for that long. So there's something about Jupiter very visible and actually emerging with Neptune never visible, in the realms of visibility and invisibility merging here. And I would say the sceptile with Taurus, Uranus, supposedly in fall, like as a result here. Now, why in fall? Because Uranus is about change and Taurus is not necessarily about change at all. Very beautifully, it wants to stay in a place where it knows it can rocket and show up the way that it is. Right? So I might eat the same meal at this particular restaurant. Why? Because I know it's like magic. You need to go try all these different things. But of course, that can lead to a different side of a trip called stubbornness. Stubbornness or alignment to one particular point of view or system will often keep us from thinking for ourselves and falling into hive mind group think in such a way that does not necessarily participate with our journey. When we start making decisions not for ourselves, but for others, this is not a bad thing. But when we are told by others how to think about others, this probably is. And I think it's the great mess of our time. I think it's totally a Pisces thing. You know, Pisces is the silver screen, or at least Neptune is. Why? Well, because when you watch a movie, you're being insisted by the cinematographer, the director, producer, writer, etc., to like have this particular vision of a thing. That's very different in a book when you read something and you create your own scene. Of course, greater authors will bring us into more context. Both beautiful, one more of an individual experience, one more of a collective experience. Well, Pisces is more of a collective experience, no doubt. I just want to share that I saw a man throw a ball to a dog, but the dog is so big that I thought I watched a deer playing fetch. And so that tripped me out right in front of Tamalpais, a very beautiful sacred mountain here. Okay, the Virgo moon insists we practice. That, in this journey, what was it good for? So there was a bit where I said some discrete things for each of the signs, and maybe that will speak to you and something you can use. Otherwise, like, I've just been on this kind of meandering Piscean trip through the strange seas of all that is, and sharing a little bit of what I do and why I do it, or what I do to get to the how. But I think it's important for us to have practice, for us to have system. This is in the Virgo space. And again, it's, I think, very telling that this conjunction is happening with the moon in Virgo. And I will also say with the sun in Aries, and close to his exalted degree there. Mercury, interestingly, having recently left Aries for Taurus to share this mutual reception with Moon through exaltation, but that says embody. But the embodiment, the be here and now, the be on earth, that is part of system, of measurement. I mean, some of the traditions say that we are here with the rod and the measuring cord to measure earth, that this is how we will get back actually to oneness, not by releasing the things that are here and the measurable, like, even physics will tell me that this desk is not a desk, but rather just simply, things moving so quickly it feels solid to me, which is a beautiful way for us to return to this truth of vibration and maybe the oneness and the music of all that is. But I am not personally on a path that says I want to release a personal embodied experience so that I can have an experience of oneness. My guess is that will happen at death. And sure, maybe I'll come back, and maybe the way to escape this many-spoked wheel is to release the me. But sometimes I feel like that is this meme that is being misused by many to distract us from the importance of what it is to be an individuated, incarnated human being. Now, that might be an expression of my own personal spiritual immaturity, and I honor systems and traditions that go way back that speak about finding that samadhi and that release of the unique ray to find the truth of the one only light. But I believe with this Aries moon, Aries sun independence being reflected by Virgo moon like independence, that there's a huge piece here that says being in a diligent, critical, explorative, even systematic, like research based, right? Like information inclined and unique point of view is what's going to help in this moment us do amazing, literal, like world change through deepening into the higher dream of oneness of all that is. And I think that that's a personal responsibility, because if we choose to use that magic, we are much less inclined to have it used against us. And my friend, that's not new. That's been happening perhaps since the beginning of empire, which means the beginning of quote unquote history, but it sure is ramping up. And I also question the force in me, knowing that perhaps it is true that the outer world is simply a reflection of that which lives within, to say, okay, well, what is this kind of dominating world controlling totalitarian scene inside of me that's being reflected in this world without? Because maybe the ones that I'm personally inclined as a card carrying Scorpio to describe as, me's of collective coercion and compliance, maybe actually because they're not experiencing the dystopian nightmare that I see on the outer screen. Maybe they're actually living examples of harmony and balance. but I can't be in that space for long, because what I'm seeing is this like attack against personal and spiritual sovereignty in the name of compassion. And there are many beautiful words like that that I see being used so intentionally in a talisman of distraction from truth. And I always try to balance my natural inclinations to rabbit hole into the shadowy places of this world with a journey into higher light and optimistic conspiracy, or instead of paranoia, the pronoia, right? So I do also know that this conjunction now can be the seed of a greater dream, but that doesn't happen to you. That happens through you. And may this Virgo moon reflecting Aries light to our eyes at the time of this powerful conjunction in such a Martian place of this sign called Pisces, with Mars near Saturn in Aquarius, tell us that it is imperative for us to maintain a unique view and not fall prey to the hive mind way that would encourage a experience such as the antenna soldiers of Kurt Vonnegut's Sirens of Titan. So read that book and it will tell you everything you need to know about what this conjunction might be and can be, should you choose to align your sacred practice to this powerful time. Thanks for spending some of that time with me. I hope you've enjoyed the meanderings on this Pisces Sea. If you're hearing these words at the very end of the flow, I'm going to guess you did. And if so, and if you're interested in more of how I pet this cosmic cat called astrology, I invite you to check out the School of Earth Astrology. We've been going since the sun's journey through Capricorn, and this year we started in January of 2022, and there would be a lot of catching up to do, but not too much if you are a devout student of these mysteries as I am. I'm teaching through sacred geometry and number magic as much as I am through the archetypes of astrology, and deep dives into fundamentals like polarity, triplicity, quadruplicity. The next astrology class will be on soul path, and I'm very excited to get there, and I'm excited that you are awakening to your path as I am attempting to my own. I will see you in space, friends. Thanks for spending some time